Welcome back to our study on the book of Daniel. Today we will be going over Daniel chapter 3, a very familiar passage with Daniel's friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. So as the story starts out, Nebuchadnezzar has an idea to build a great statue. Now you might ask, where did he get that idea? Probably from his dream. He just had a dream of a giant statue, and then the very next thing he does is go and build a giant statue. Now the question always remains, what did the statue look like? Was it a statue of him, or was it a statue of his god Marduk? It's most likely a statue of his god Marduk. It's highly unlikely Nebuchadnezzar, he is very vain in himself, as we'll see in chapter 4, but you don't get any idea that he wanted himself to be worshipped. That was not really a Babylonian concept. It's more likely he brings out this statue for his people to worship. Why? Because he's conquered all these different people groups, and he has officials from all these different people groups now working for him. He didn't just conquer the Israelites and have them. He conquered a lot of different nations, and he probably did similar things. So he is basically saying, all right, I need to make sure everyone is on the same page, that my kind of brainwashing university that we saw in chapter 1 is working, and that I'm not going to have any revolts in my kingdom over, especially within my own political structure, over all of this kinds of things. And so what he does is he builds this statue out in the province of Babylon, so not in the city. So Daniel's not there, as we said in last chapter. And he calls all his senior officials basically out for this meeting. He calls the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, anyone who has kind of a government payroll job kind of thing. He calls and says, all right, we got to make sure you all are loyal. You're all on the same page. You're all going to worship my God. You're all going to be pro-Babylon, this kind of thing. So in the verse 1, chapter 3, it says, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. So it's about 90 feet tall. He set it up in the plains of Dura in the province of Babylon. And the king Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So they came, and they all stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigger, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." So they probably set up this image, something similar to this, of their god Marduk, probably most likely, sometimes called Bel. Daniel's back at the royal court. They have all these instruments. Sometimes people, about 100 years ago, people were trying to say, use this passage as an example of why Daniel didn't write the book of Daniel, because they said, oh, a lot of these instruments are Greek. So this must mean somebody was writing it in 150 BC and not in 500 BC, but there's been several people who have done long studies on this. A guy by the name of Yamaguchi did one, in which they show that Babylon and Greece regularly traded back and forth, and these instruments would have been regularly available to them. So then they say, therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, all these instruments, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, all these instruments, shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So, a couple things there. First, it says they do not serve your gods or the golden image. So it seems like in connection there, the golden images of the gods. But also, you've got these Chaldeans, these wise men, whatever you want to call them. They seem to be very jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Why? Because they got shown up in chapter 2. Oh, Daniel comes in and is able to do what they're not. He's in charge of them now, this outsider, and then he gets his 3 buddies who really didn't do anything in chapter 2 except for pray for Daniel to now be in charge, be these kind of powerful men in the providence. So they're like, hey, we got to get rid of these guys. These guys are problematic. They're taking our jobs. They're these outsiders. We got to get rid of them. And they see this as a golden opportunity. Somebody peeks when they're supposed to be bowing down and says, oh, those three guys that that Nebuchadnezzar just put in charge, they didn't do what he said. Let's get rid of them. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. So you kind of get the idea that he's upset that somebody is not listening to him. He's the king. It's highly unlikely. His dad was the king as well. He grew up as the prince. He's probably been told no 0 times in his life. Anything he wants, he gets throughout his entire life. And so when he hears these guys, he gets upset. But then you kind of get the idea that he likes these guys too, because he doesn't just immediately kill them. He gives them a second chance. He's like, hey, I heard that you guys didn't do this. If you do it, you'll be okay. Maybe he's thinking maybe there was some kind of translation issue. Maybe they didn't quite understand what they were supposed to do. But it seems like he kind of likes them in some way, because he doesn't just immediately throw them into the furnace. But he then says, but if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? And that is the crux of the argument. That is what I would call the apologetic argument that Nebuchadnezzar himself makes against Yahweh. It's very similar to the argument that the Rabshakeh makes in Isaiah 36 and 37 against Yahweh. Nebuchadnezzar's like, I've conquered your city. I conquered everyone's city. My God is strong. I'm strong. My God is providing me this. Your God is puny. He was smart last time and could interpret the dreams, but it's one thing to interpret a dream. It's another thing to save somebody. Your God can't stop me. I've already defeated your God, is kind of the idea. And so he is literally challenging the Yahweh to basically an apologetic challenge, if you will. Then they say, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. And so they straight up tell him, we're not doing it. We don't care what you do to us. We are not worshiping your gods, in your image and everything. And then they say an interesting phrase. They say, look, our God can deliver us, but there's no guarantee that he's going to deliver us. It says if he doesn't, he doesn't mean that he's not God. It doesn't mean that he's somehow weaker. It just means he chose not to. We know he can, but sometimes he chooses not to, and that's an important distinction. You know, when if you get sick or somebody loses their job or somebody has a health issue or something, we pray to God and we say, God, we know that you can do this. You're God. You're in charge. But you may not choose to do this. God is going to, we all know from the story, God is going to deliver Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But there's been thousands and if not millions of martyrs throughout church history that God didn't deliver. He could have, but he didn't. We don't know why. We're not God. He is the one who ultimately makes the decision. And they understand that. Then it says, then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I think he thought there was some kind of miscommunication. And when they basically tell him that, it's like he's a spoiled brat who's never been told no in his life. And as soon as he hears that, he just blows up on them. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. Now, that's not really going to do anything. If you get thrown into an oven, you're going to die anyway. But he's just so mad he wants revenge on them, basically. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Now, this is probably what the furnace would have looked like. Something like this. It has a side window. It's a brick furnace. It has kind of a side area where you would throw the stuff in. And that's how Nebuchadnezzar is going to see. And then the top is, the heat rises, so the top is where all the heat comes out of. So there's probably some kind of ladder or something up there where the men go up to the top and throw them in. They have these kinds of things all over the Middle East, where they've dug up. They call them kilns, a brick kiln, something like that. And so they throw these men in, but look how hot it is. It says the men who were bound in their and to cast them into the fire furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So it's not some kind of, the fire wasn't that hot, it was some kind of mistake. No, the people around them, the guys who throw them in the furnace, who don't even get into the furnace itself, just on top, die. It's so hot. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? And they answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like the son of the gods. Now that's a question, interpretive issue. The King James, a good translation, nothing wrong with the King James. But it said, they thought this was Jesus. And so they wrote son of God, capitalized like Jesus is. But remember, Nebuchadnezzar is a pagan at this point. He didn't know who Jesus is. He's a polytheist. He doesn't even believe in one God. The text itself in the Aramaic is plural, son of the gods. He just knows it's some kind of, later on he's going to call it an angel. It's some kind of divine being that looks different than the humans in some way. Now, there's a very real possibility that it could be Jesus. We know that Jesus appeared in Christophanies throughout the Old Testament in various ways. Sometimes he's called the angel of the Lord. So it could have been Jesus, or it could have merely been an angel, or not. It's not 100% certain on that. But whatever it is, he's like, hey, I see another guy in there. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace, and he declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over their bodies of these men. The hair on their heads was not singed, their cloaks not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Now, if you've ever been camping or just been around a fire, roast a marshmallow or something like that, you know if you're around fire for any period of time, you're going to smell like smoke. And they don't even smell like smoke. It's like the fire wasn't even there. God does this miraculous thing. Then Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So we see like I talked about last time, Nebuchadnezzar has this kind of stepping stone transition. Chapter 2 was your God's really smart. Chapter 3, it's your God can deliver you unlike anybody else. But he still doesn't say your God is the only God, your God is my God, anything like that. We're not going to see that until chapter 4, really. But he's getting closer. He's progressing to that. And so the theological implications of the chapter, pride brings about harmful results. Nebuchadnezzar is very prideful. Everything's about himself. God ultimately intervenes and says, hey, you think you're so great, I'm going to stop you and defeat your plan. Godly people must have faith in God in difficult situations. They trusted God, even if God doesn't save us, we're still going to trust God. We're still going to do this. We're still going to be obedient to God, even if our own lives are on the line. And third, God is able to save his people from harm, but does not always choose to do so. They say, but if not. You kind of get this thing. It's God can save, and he does save in certain situations. I think he saves more than we know. I think there's many times in our lives where something happens and we go, oh, that was lucky, or oh, that was great. And we're going to get up to heaven one day, and we're going to say, hey, God, where were you? And he's going to say, well, I saved you here. I saved you there. I saved you here. I did all this. I was working behind the scenes. And we're going to go, wow, you were way more involved in our lives than we ever realized. I think of myself. One time when I was about 21, I was driving. I was doing an internship down in Florida at a church, and I was driving over to see my fiance Natalie, now my wife Natalie, and I was raining really hard. I was driving over a bridge. I hydroplaned. I spun around, just totaled the car, just completely out of my control, and literally I'm staring at people driving right at me, and yet nobody hit me. 70 miles an hour on the interstate. Everyone avoids me. Everything that I know God was involved in that. God spared me from that. I easily could have died in that situation. And I think there's different stuff like that happens all the time in our lives that we just don't know about. So that wraps up chapter 3. Next time we'll look at chapter 4 and carry on into that with Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the tree and his kind of craziness that results in that.